this report on post-crisis policy challenges in the world economy actually starts by saying that what we are seeing as a recovery from the recent recession, that what we are seeing is not a full-fledged recovery. It's a two-speed recovery that distinguishes between the slow pace being achieved among developed countries and the more normal pace of real recovery among the emerging countries. Situation is certainly warrants some grave concern, and this is being correctly raised in this report because in spite of the recovery among emerging countries, developing countries, of course, by themselves, they are not actually sufficient to compensate for the loss of demand that we are seeing in the more developed part of the world.
We are really at a critical juncture. The situation is extremely dangerous because what could happen, one could say, the best that could happen if we do nothing at this moment of time in the world economy is that we're looking for 2 lost decades, Japanese-like lost decades in stagnation and deflation in the world economy. This is not, again, not an exaggeration, but this is, I think, a very realistic view on the world economy, and we have been coming up with something like that for quite some time, as the Secretary General mentioned. And the reason for that, the main reason for that, is indeed, as the Secretary General said, fiscal retrenchment, but the other reason, he mentioned it also, is the point that we made in 2010. The point that we do not have the normal pattern of wage recovery in the world economy as we had in the past. And we have put some details in the report. If you look at it, you will see that, for example, for the first time in the last 30 years, but I think it's going far back into the Great Depression, since then, for the first time in the United States, we do not have wage increases anymore. We have not only jobless recovery, that's absolutely normal that you have in the first 2-3 years rather jobless recovery. We have wageless recovery. We have wageless recovery for the first time. And this is not only true for the United States, it is true for Japan, and it's true for Europe. So put together, Japan, Europe, United States, then you end up with something like 70% of the world economy. 70% of the world economy, in 70% of the world economy, the average people, I used to call it, have now diminished expectations in a way that they do not expect their income to rise anymore for the next years. So if you have that, as the Secretary General said, you have no consumption, and if you have no consumption, you have no investment and you have nothing else. Because for these 3 big blocks, you cannot expect something from exports, because the rest of the world for them is much too small. They only have exports, consumption and investment, but no exports. So forget about exports. For them, if the consumption is not reviving, then the economy will, at the best case, stall. That's the best case, is stagnation. And as we see in Japan, we have seen in Japan for 20 years, something like deflation or something hovering around the 0 inflation rate.